Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. We are on the air. This is Thesis. 3, 2, 1, we are on the air. This is Thesis. Everything is everything. I am your host, J.Marie. How's it going out there, folks? Hope you are doing well. Thank you for showing up and hanging out with us today. Coming to you live from Zombie Land. Yes, sir. We always do. We always have. And we always will. All right. Well, I hope you find yourself well. I hope you find yourself healthy and safe. And I want to thank you again for checking in on us today. Been a minute, but we are here. We are well, and we are chugging along. Lot of stuff going on. All right, so I've been thinking all week about what we are going to talk about. And I actually planned on doing this topic last week. And then I was actually, I was thinking about filming on location again, and I was going to go to a local bookstore that's down here on Jefferson Avenue in Oak Cliff. And so I was going to check in with them, see if they would mind if I just kind of like pick a little corner in the background. Because I wanted to have a background with books and all that stuff, because that's the topic I wanted to talk about. Kind of books, but a little bit more than that. So as I started looking into that place, they still had their mask. You have to wear a mask to be in their store. And it was like deliveries only, and so I don't even think they let people mingle. So I didn't even bother calling when I saw that on their page that you had to wear a mask. I said, nah, I'm not even gonna. And I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I didn't, because I needed to do more research, And during the week, I dug in a little bit into early writings, into early forms of writing, and because I wanted to talk about books, because books, I love books, and there's so much. As you can see, well, for those on video, as you can see, I'm in front of my little thesis library, which isn't that big, but I have a lot of the classics there, and I wanted to talk about books, but not just like go over different books that I like or whatever. I wanted to dig in a little bit, like, you know, the beginning of it all. It's with the clay tablets and writing, and then the alphabets and keeping records, and throughout the ages to what we have now, books, mass printed books that we can read and translate and whatever, right? So I wanted to talk about that process. And as I was studying, I dug into the earliest forms of writing and the earliest forms of record keeping. And of course, when you dig way in, you see that the earliest forms of writing was like a cuneiform script, it's called. That's that writing was used. They say it was developed around 3200 BC, but pinpointing exactly when something was developed, it's kind of hard, but it gives you a rough estimate of when it was used. Definitely, when it was used in a big way in the Sumerian, in the Sumerian and Akkadian empires, in the Babylonian empires. That's the kind of writing that they used back then. We're talking 3200 BC. And it was, so when you look it up and when you study a little bit, you see that it's like little lines, little notches and wedges. They would take a piece of clay, and with a stylus, would make little markings into a piece of clay. And as the studies show, as the scientists that kind of dug in a little bit into some of these writings, as they started translating some of these early tablets, they see that it was a lot of record keeping. A lot of these tablets had, heads of cattle and grain and those type of things. Tablet after tablet of record keeping. So the earliest forms of writing were basically numbers. A bundle of this, a bundle of that, cattle, whatever. Money, record keeping were the first symbols that were being used. And then as time progressed, of course, like any technology or any tool or anything, it can be improved upon throughout consequential generations. A tool, a process, modes and stuff like that. So when you look at these tablets, they're amazing because it's just like a bunch of little dashes and lines and stuff. And they had a form of writing that was just so people are starting to be able to translate it now. I think there was a similar, several similar stela, what they call like not statues, but big, you know, carved out uh, pieces of granite and stuff, whatever. And it'll have the like two or three different types of writing. So that's how people were starting to be able to translate. Like it'll tell a story in written in cuneiform, and then it'll have the same story written, let's say, in Greek, right? So almost like the Rosetta Stone, but the Rosetta Stone had, what did it have? It had Egyptian, it had Greek, and something else. So it wasn't the Rosetta Stone, but there are several pieces of antiquity out there that have the same story written in two different languages, which helps them able to translate the cuneiform script. So then we use these little tablets, little square tablets, to keep records and keeping track of stuff like that. But then as their writing, as their symbols grew and their ability to write and process kind of evolved, they started being able to write more and more words, and so these tablets, as the time went on, they became larger with more information on there, names and things that people were doing. So there was more names of more things. So it evolved into bigger tablets with more writing. So what they would do also, they would make a cylinder with an image and writing on it, and they would roll it on a piece of clay, and it would leave an imprint on the piece of clay, which would later be dried and then whatever, and so they've found these pressed out clays with the pressing of these cylinders. So you could kind of imagine like a stamp, right? It's carved out, you put the ink and it stamps and it leaves the thing. But this is a cylinder with the carving on it, so when you roll it like a tortilla roller, yeah, imagine a tortilla roller with little patterns on it, and you roll it over the tortilla dough, it's going to leave the little imprints of whatever's on the roller. So they would keep records like that also on cylinders. So then they would press them out, and then you can see what the cylinder says. It has writing. There's an image of the gods or whatever, some cattle, whatever it is that they're trying to tell in the story, or the record that they're trying to keep on this cylinder, So we're talking about 3200, BC here, 5,000, over 5,000 years ago, that they were using writing in the Sumerian Akkadian Empire, those times way, way, way back then. And there's some really awesome stories. If you dig into, so how we like to look at everything here at Thesis with religion and the Bible and history and all this stuff, right? So a lot of the oldest writings that they got for the Bible, like the King's List, it's the Akkadian King's List, and the Bible just calls the King's List, but in the historical realm and the historical facts, it's called the Akkadian King's List. So there's these tablets and documentation from long ago where some of these stories from way before it seemed to have been rooted from early Akkadian, Sumerian, Babylonian stories that are written in these tablets in cuneiform, and some very, very familiar. One very, very familiar story about a guy who survives a flood, and that the gods, in quote, told him you must build a ship, or one god told him, you must build a ship, something's going to happen, you have to do this, please listen to me. The guy did it, took his family and whatever, and then this flood came. So this story is written on tablets that are about 3,000 years old in a story called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's tablets. There's a bunch of tablets that tell the different parts of the stories, but there's one tablet in particular where it tells the story of Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, something like that. Forgive me, I might be wrong, but from way back in the day, and he was trying to find immortality because he knew that some of the gods and some of the demigods found immortality by whatever means, by some different means, and he wanted to find those means. And he knew that he had a relative from way back in the day named Upnapishtim, which survived a flood many, many thousands of years before. And his reward for surviving the flood and doing what the gods told him to do was eternal life. So in this tale that was written like 5,000 years ago, in cuneiform script, in clay tablets, it tells the story how King Gilgamesh went and found and spoke with his long lost ancestor Upnapishtim, who survived a great flood that wiped out mankind, other than him and his family. And he asked them how, he basically asked them, how did you get to live forever? And he explained the story to him. And it's basically verbatim, as he explained to him the story that we know as Noah. So writing, the ability to write down stories preserves them for generations to come. Now, whatever we may think about religion and all that stuff, right, but these stories survive because of whatever importance that they may have. They may have some historical importance. If there was a flood that wiped out mankind a long ass time ago, then it'd be good to know that. Never mind the other stuff about God and all these gods and stuff. Let's look at the historical stuff. Let's see what we can find historically. In the tablets of Gilgamesh, we have a story of a great flood that wiped everybody out and a man who survived. In the tales of the Bible, which were retold from the Jewish tales and all that stuff, we have the same type of tale, right? Throughout the world, in different areas of the world, we have stories of a great flood that whatever it did, right? So regardless of all of that, there's records of this flood, but even outside of the flood, the ability to write stuff down and preserve it in clay, and then later on after that on wood carving, and then also written on skins or papyrus, along the way. Then we got to the printing press and all that. But the ability to preserve information, throughout the ages, especially those things that are thousands and thousands of years old, like, wow. Cause we got in these thousands of, I mean, the the amount of cuneiform script tablets that exist are thousands, and they describe daily life for the people of these regions, in those times, daily life, farming, and those type of things. But also we got like I was saying a minute ago, the Sumerian kings list, and the meticulous record keeping, that that evolved from writing from tiny little clay tablets into what we have today on the internet, on our phones. But even before then, the printing press, which was like was the beginning of the tidal wave of information. Okay, so we move from 3,000 years ago to after that, as we get closer to the turn of the ages or whatever, right? The AD, BC, whatever one call it. As the processes of writing and alphabets in the Hebrew languages and in all the different languages, they evolved. But it all evolved from these original writings in the Sumerian and in that what we were speaking of. But see, throughout the years, it took 1,000 years before the earliest forms of alphabet were created. You know, and then another 500 years before it started being used more, where people started learning it, where it can actually be used utility, where there'll be a lot of more utility to it. Then of course, as time goes on, when the alphabets got developed, then people would be able to write on papyrus script, on skins or whatever with ink, with ink or paint, and try to preserve writings or be able to teach each other writings and that sort of information. Now, I've brought up before how information has, for the most part, always been proprietary. Information has always belonged to institutions, whether churches, colleges, governments, whatever, libraries, right? But not even just in the modern times. Let's go way back before modern times, because now we have abundance of information. But let's go prior to the abundance of information, right? Let's go 1,000 years ago. So 1,000 years ago, there were books, but they were scarce. And that is why churches and institutions like this would have libraries and preserve them. Because if not for churches, if not for some of these institutions, and I don't mean just specifically the churches, but institutions throughout time that have preserved writings and scripts and scrolls and tablets and whatever they could, for the same reason is that there is valuable information in those tablets, books, scripts, etc. And I used to kind of see that as a negative, but now as I started digging in a little bit, I kind of got a better picture as they were guardians of the information. Because in some ways, when we think about information being proprietary, that it belongs to somebody, that information belonged to the church for thousands of years. How could that be? But see, it all comes back to how we're thinking. If I'm thinking that way, I'm thinking aggressively, negatively to why didn't they? Okay. But what if we say they were preserving that information throughout the ages of tumult, throughout the ages of war and conquest and destruction? These institutions, let's say like the Roman Catholic Church, has preserved so much stuff, so much information, so many artifacts, because they had the power to do so. For instance, the Roman Catholic Church, But even before the Roman Catholic Church, the Jewish people, the Hebrews, kept meticulous records, and their standards went way back. So we get a lot. So see, as we can see the big picture, we look at where writing started, when it started, and as we move along the timeline, as people spread out and these ideas get spread out and far and wide, if something has utility to it, it will last. It will continue to be used, and it will continue to be improved upon like a tool. So as writing was there was so much utility to writing that over the ages it got improved to where it became where it was a point to where only, of course, again with the institutions, the kings and kingdoms and rich people and these folks who were loyal to the crowns and this and that, only they could get an education. But for the same reason is that the kingdom, quote unquote, in quotes, the church, kept the records. They knew how to teach people how to read. But until the point to where it got enough to be able to teach in the masses, so we go way back, way back. This sort of stuff is only available to certain people, nobles and those type of things, It's amazing, like, wow. So, okay, so we come along to, the Jewish people, very meticulous. They had their alphabet, they have their way of writing, they told their stories and wrote their books and everything, and passed it along orally, through tradition, through prayer, through synagogue, through all the things that they do, right? um, but then at the same time, we have, remember, as we're moving the timeline along, we have to remember we're moving along pretty quickly on the timeline. So, but there's civilizations rising and falling, not civilizations, but nations rising and falling up after and coming, and then adjusting with their languages and improving, and all these things, right? So as time goes on, then we have the Greeks, as with their style of writing, the Greek alphabet. Then as we move along the timeline, then we have the Roman alphabet. you know but as these things, as time goes on, there seems to be like a combination of the best parts of different types of alphabet, like what works from one, from the next to the other, kind of combine to where the phonetic sounds, are limited to 26 or 24 sounds or something like that. So the English, the Greek, well, not the Greek, the Roman, the Latin alphabet, is the final, like, iteration, or English, the iteration of the alphabet. It hasn't been improved much since, since the Middle Ages. Like, after that, it was like English was rock and roll by then. They didn't need to improve on it anymore. But record keeping. So until there was a time to where they had to, write everything out, by page by. If it was a declaration, they write it out. Boom, one. Or if they needed a few because they were going to post it throughout the kingdom, they needed to write out each one by hand. So you see, the process of writing the information, or books or whatever, was so long and so meticulous that, of course, there wasn't going to be so many. And once there was a book or a manuscript done, they were going to protect it and hold it and keep it as long as they could to preserve that work that was put into that book. So that's why these institutions, I don't want to say stepped up, but it just fell into their lap, because they were the ones who ran the kingdom. They was the ones with the money. They were the ones with the knowledge. So they were the ones that started creating writings and saving them, scrolls and libraries of information. Okay? Again, but it was very difficult because it had to be done by hand. It had to be done by hand. Every single piece of parchment had to be written by hand. So the limitations of the ability to write, the limitations of the, it takes, when we're talking about not money in the sense of today, but, if we're thinking 1,000 years ago or whatever, the only those with, those in authority and those with money and whatever can afford to buy ink and papyrus and scrolls and skins and whatever to be able to write stuff down. So, you could see the limitation of information being even produced on a massive scale. And that was the way for thousands of years. Well, since the clay tablets. Because even with the clay tablets, they had to make each one. And if they were telling a story, they didn't mass produce stories. So like the tablets of Gilgamesh, they're huge. They're probably, I don't know, a few feet tall, with a lot of writing on there, and a lot of pieces are missing and stuff like that. But these are big tablets that tell a big story, but the smaller tablets that tell smaller, more condensed information, anyhow, as they still had to be done by hand, one at a time. So then, of course, as we move the timeline along, we come to a point to where, the Middle Ages, where things are kind of, Christianity is kind of, in the early stages of, or whatever, and then the Romans, are in control. They were the power, they were the biggest power at the time, were the Roman Empire. And Constantine, we've talked about this before, but we'll just do a little quick refresh. Constantine was the emperor, and he was the emperor that made Christianity the official religion of Rome. He had a vision, and God told him to write a cross, to make the red cross on all his weaponry and all that, and he would win. So, so after that, he transformed the official religion from all the different gods that they used to have to one God, and Christianity, Jesus, and all that good stuff. So then, they started, since it was the Roman Empire, and then we're gonna do this Christianity thing. So we start collecting all the writings and all kinds of stuff, to so we'll know about this Christianity stuff, to be able to produce it and rewrite it and teach it and stuff, right? So they started gathering all this information, and then at that time, in those times, they would have what we call like woodcuts. So if you can imagine like the stamp that we talked about earlier, the little roller thing, but imagine it on a flat board where you carve out your information that you're gonna write, like a mirror image. You roll the paint on it, and then you stamp it on paper. So now the mass production of information became just a little bit more improved upon with these woodcuts. Because yes, you would make one woodcut, but you can reuse it to print on paper. Boom, because you ink it and boom. So like a big stamp. Boom, you ink it and boom. So that is how a lot more information started getting disseminated in the Middle Ages. With the kingdoms, so now around right around 1450, something like that. There was a guy the name Guttenberg. I don't know if that was his first name or his last name, but he developed what we call the Gutenberg press, which is the earliest form of printing press, with the little types that you write. You have your little type settings, and you set each word into the slots, and then it's just like the woodcut, but now you can remove the letters and fit them how you need to spell whatever you want. He developed the little rack system. He developed the little imprint system, because first it started off with the wood prints, because he was doing the wood prints, and he was thinking, man, I need to figure out a way to be able to maneuver these letters without having to carve the whole thing out. So he thought, well, why don't I carve one letter out? And then so he carved a whole bunch of letters to make words. And then he designed the little rack system where you print it, but the letters have to be backwards, the same thing, and boom, he started making the press. He could start pressing information quicker and quicker. So one of the first books that was mass produced with the Gutenberg press was the Bible that we know today, was the King James whatever Bible, the Holy Bible. Because the Roman Empire, since they had changed it into the official religion, decided to gather all these stories, and put them together into one book. They had the Council of Nicaea that came together to decide what books should we include into this work of because the word Bible means library. It's a library of different books. I don't know the amount of books, but there's a bunch of them. Each Genesis, right? Leviticus, each one of those is a book, right? So the word Bible means library. There's a library in that one book of different stories. So the Gutenberg press was utilized to start mass producing the Bible when they finally decided what it was going to look like, what it was going to say, what it was going to be. The Gutenberg press. So the first book that was ever mass produced was the Holy Bible, which that's pretty amazing. But we knew that. But the process itself, though. So now they have books, and now they can teach. See, just a quick reminder. regardless of the whole God part, regardless of the Jesus part, regardless of all of that, separate that part of it. Never mind the religious aspects of the book that we call the Bible. Never mind those parts of it. Let's look at it as what it contains. It contains thousands of years of information, but in one compact, form, one compact place, where you can see the story of this man, a bloodline of this specific bloodline of people throughout the thousands of years of time. That's pretty awesome record keeping, you know. So regardless of the religious aspect about it, there's the information that is in there is important in many ways, but it's a miracle. It's a miracle in and of itself that this book that we call the Bible is what it is and was made the way it was when it was at the moment of time that it was. That book, outside of the religious part, that book has helped educate the world, literate in literacy. I don't know, literacy, to learn to read, right? So the Roman Catholic Church, right? When we think of Rome and we think of Roman Catholic Church, their mission was to go out and to spread this story, this book's information to the furthest corners of the world, and at the same time bringing education of literacy, how to read. Again, never mind the religious aspect about it, but they brought this new thing to places in the world that would have probably never had access to anything like that. So what that book has been able to accomplish with those from a long time ago in the Roman Empire, Roman Catholic Church, who did what they did, that planned out, or maybe it wasn't even exactly planned, but the way it worked out is that book helped, I want to say, literate the world, make the world literate, right? That book helped make the world literate in a unified language. First of all was, well, I guess Latin, and then Old English, when it was like the King James Version or whatever. Right? Wow. The printing press. So, that's just the Bible, but we go from there. So now the printing press is still, it's early on in its in its technological life. Only those with wealth, kings and kingdoms and empires are able to utilize it, and of course pay for it and develop on it and everything. Oh, one of the interesting things is, so as this technology evolved and started spreading out, the different fonts developed, right? Old English style, and then I don't know the different names of fonts, pero because the different regions made their own letters, right? That press that's over there in France, they carved their letters a different style than the presses that were in the England, So that's where all the different fonts started appearing, because the different nations, the different presses would have their different letterings, and that's something that we still carry to today, all the different font system and stuff like that, which is pretty awesome. And so even still throughout the ages, being that this was early on in its technological life, books are still rare, as that even though the printing press now allows manuscripts to be pressed out at a more rapid rate, but they were still expensive to do, expensive to hold, and that. So even still, for a while there, even though more and more information started getting disseminated, those with power and wealth were the ones that would be able to have books and libraries and stuff like that. Again, with the churches and the kingdoms and all of that, because of the same thing. Now we could see it as a privilege of wealth, or also as a way of Mother Nature preserving that stuff, putting it in the right hands. In the meantime, while while society catches up or something like that. Because the churches, the colleges, the institutions have preserved information, for a long, long time. It's we have the tombs in Egypt with all the hieroglyphs and all the stuff written on the walls and stuff. Information preserved. Books. I love books. So as time went on, and the Roman Catholic Church spread out throughout the world, and not just the Roman Catholic Church, but they were a huge part of it. After Rome collapsed, the Roman Catholic Church took over that part of that aspect of it, of the institutional knowledge that was held by the Roman Empire is now being held by the Roman Catholic Church, which is a good thing because they are preserving it and protecting it. But then also, as the Roman Empire collapsed, then all these other kingdoms and empires rose in its stead. And then, of course, then we can talk about like England and France and all these different kingdoms that had their writings, that preserved their manuscripts and stories and religion. And the same thing. But as time went on, more and more stuff was being produced because the press, the printing press, the Guttenberg press, is being used widely now throughout Europe. And then of course it makes things a little bit it makes information easier to disseminate to the people when you can mass produce declarations, when you can mass produce information or stories and stuff like that. Because from having to write it by hand to mass producing it, that's a huge change. The early the colonialists in America used the printing press like they had it down to a science. The printing press, newspapers, propaganda, all kinds of. They had it down to a craft, and then they turned it into where they can produce. So they would print out pages and pages of information quicker and quicker and quicker to where they were able to compile them and make like a newspaper, what we know today as a newspaper. Then the same process though, by stamping them out one at a time, putting them together, folding them together, now you have several sheets of information that you can hand out to the people or sell or whatever. And then as the time went on, of course, with the Industrial Revolution and the steam engine and machinery, like these systems just got improved more and more and more as time went on, as technology advanced, as innovation, people's minds, innovation, creativity, all these things added to it along the way. Because the first guy who decided to pick up a ball of clay and put a mark on it, who knows what he was thinking? Maybe it was two guys and the guy took one of his sheep and he says, well, hold on, let me make a record of it. And he got some clay and like, you took one of my sheep, and put a little gash in there. Who knows? But from that one moment and then thousands of years and improvement upon improvement, and regeneration upon regeneration of that one mark to mark the first sheep that he gave to his homeboy or fronted to his homeboy, whatever it was, evolved into the alphabets that we have now. Theoretically, something like that. Not exactly linear, but you know what I'm saying. Throughout the ages, things get improved on, but only if and when, um, you know, um, if and when the times are proper. Like, if there's wars and if there's calamity, stuff doesn't survive. Books, pages, none of that stuff is surviving. When the Spaniards landed on the Mexican soil, they burned all kinds of codices, books, tap, writings on papyrus, and they burned a lot of that stuff because heresy or whatever. So God knows what information was in those codices. But humankind is like that. When there's times of peace, we can improve on what we have. We can improve on what is good, right? Languages, writing, the way we tell stories. You know, the unification of humans across the world, can be attributed to certain things. Some of us might, we might say like religion and stuff like that, but even outside of religion, the the unifying language, let's say, in the books of religion, that spread further than their localized area. Buddhism is very localized. Hinduism is very localized. You know what I'm saying? Roman Catholic, Christianity, Judaism, these ideas have spread throughout the entire Western world. You know? And never mind the religious aspect of that. The information that is held within those writings, within those teachings, right? Within those traditions that many religions still hold today, that are thousands of years old. Traditions of kings and the Sumerians kings list. One of the oddest things about it is when you add up all the amounts of years that these kings reigned, we're talking about like 40,000 years, some shit, like way back. But nobody talks about that because it's too way out of, like, nah, maybe they miscalculated. I don't know. But it's written down in these tablets, you know? So there's so much information, so much valuable information that is written in tablets, in scrolls, on walls of pyramids, in caverns, on stela, in books, in churches, and all over the place. They found the Dead Sea Scrolls in a jar, rolled up in a jar, buried in the desert. You know what I'm saying? Information, being able to write it down, our thoughts, being able to write it down. First of all, that's a miracle. That's a miracle. Being able to write down what we are thinking and communicating it to someone over there, someone far away from us, and even to someone years in the future. Imagine that. Wow. And then going past that, going past just writing letters to each other, writing stories and books filled with wisdom and information and record keeping, so that we can remember where we've been, and maybe we can have an idea of where we're going. Record keeping is important. The more meticulous, the better. In everyday transactions, if you're in business, you want to keep, your receipts, you want to keep all your records straight, because, you never know. But imagine throughout the ages, it only would take several things to go wrong for writing and for the printing press and for all this stuff. Who knows? Who knows? But because of people's innovation, because of people's desire to improve upon something. Remember, Gutenberg used to work with the woodcuts, and he was frustrated. He wanted to find a way to make it easier to do this process instead of having to carve out this whole wood to tell a story. And that desire to want to find an answer to the problem to make his job easier is what helped guide him to that place that he said, wow, if I carve individual letters and line them up, then this process will become easier and faster, and we can make sentences, and you know, and that idea just was born inside of him, almost like it was revealed to him, because the question in his heart was saying, how can I improve on this to make, sure, to make our job easier, but also to be able to produce more, right? That's what he was asking himself. And in asking himself, he started looking for the answer. He started thinking for the answer. He started looking for the answer in the ether. You meditate, you think about it, you look at what you're working on, and then all of a sudden, bing, it's like the light turns on. It's a revelation. It's something that is just, whoa, here it is, bing, cut each letter out. What? And he improved on that, and then subsequent generations improved on that, kingdoms improved on it, to where we are today with computers and Xerox copy machines and laser printers and all kinds of stuff. That all started, well, when he had the nerve to want to make his job a little easier. And he started trying to figure out what it was that he can do to get there. Mr. Guttenberg, Steve Guttenberg. That wasn't his name. A step. But let's go way before that. The first guy that wrote that line, hey, you owe me 1 cattle. And he gave that clay to his homeboy. Right? Oh, damn. Next time, you owe me 2 cattle. Oh, shit, check it out, bro. 2 lines. 1, 2, 1, 2. The human mind is amazing. You know, and these things don't happen. We can see it in a snapshot, you know, through the historical lens. We can look back and say, Esther, wow, yes, look how it happened. By looking back 5,000 years, we can fast forward everything and say, oh, look how it happened. From the 1, 2, to the A, B, C, D, and now everything. You know what I'm saying? But through that timeline, we could toggle the switch. Remember, I don't know about remember, but the timeline, in our mind, if we have the clarity in our mind, we can see the timeline. We can move along that timeline to speed up the process to see where it was, from the clay tablets with the guy with the 1, to the people carving out the woodcuts, right? To the Gutenberg guy improving on the woodcuts, to where we are today. Now the technology, I do not know how a laser printer works. I have the slightest idea. But I'm sure the principles are similar, because the little ink thing to the printer, it has a little thing, and I don't know, but it still has to press out the letter somehow, some way. But machinery, technology, all of that is beautiful. But look how far we've come in 5,000 years. We've come so far in 5,000 years. From writing in clay tablets to writing on our phones, on our devices that we hold in our hand that have a glass screen and are powered by this thing that we called electricity. We could communicate with each other on these devices, with people next door, or with people on the other side of the world. I can write you a message and hit send, and you will receive it in a few seconds. I can turn on the video camera and broadcast live to the world instantly. Those things are a little different, broadcast and all that, but it all started from the ability to write down information and share it with others, because ideas then get shared. Different traditions can maybe begin to be understood. You know, concepts, ideas, all of these things can now be learned and preserved, taught, you know, uh, for future generations. Good information, historical information. History is wrought with horrible things, but the ability to know those things comes from the ability to write it down, to mark it down, to stamp it down, to into a book, into a story. I think being able to remember the past helps us go into the future. And books, writing, the preservation of information and the sharing of information is one of the, probably if not the main catalyst to true progress throughout the world since the Middle Ages and even before so. Because they were still disseminating information handwritten, but it was still being disseminated. Amazing. Amazing. How we go from a clay tablet to what we have today, where I can text you a message, hit send, and we'll be communicating instantly. That's pretty amazing. You know, there's a lot of folks along the way who deserve a pat on the back, because of where we are today with books and the preservation of information and all of that. And we can go down the list, but for sure the Gutenberg press, the first editions of the Bible in Latin, este, was a huge catalyst to making the world a literate place, and that is pretty awesome. And I like that. And I was gonna talk about some of my favorite books and stuff, but I think we'll wrap it up there. All right. I want to thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. I love history. I love religion, the study of religions. I love all of this stuff, and being able to talk about these ideas, this that has a combination of all of that, historical information and then the biblical information and religious, the stuff that we call religious in quote information. I love it. And I love it because I'm so well versed in it that it just kind of flows, it just kind of flows from my mouth, and I love doing it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed and the information that we shared, and that it maybe sparks your interest into wanting to dig a little bit more into some of these things to see what you can learn about it. I love it. I've been studying about the cuneiform writing for probably about 12 years, like a long time. So that's something that I know a lot about. Well, not so much, but enough to carry a good conversation. All right, Esther. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please hit the subscribe button. And if you really like the show, please tell your friends also, and share with them, and let them know that we are here. You hit the subscribe button, tell your friends. We don't put out content every day, so you want to hit the subscribe button and then check back on us soon, because sometimes there's a little breaks in between, but it's okay. We're here. We're getting it done. But hit the subscribe button, check back on us soon. Also, we have our Facebook page up with our videos. There's some YouTube videos up also. This show is being recorded. I am running ads and clips. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of views. People seem to like the message. I want to thank you guys out there for that. Please share if you like the message, if you find it helpful or entertaining or enlightening. Tell your friends, and just help us spread the word. All right, guys, I want to thank you for spending your time with us today, for checking in on us today. What else? Any news? No. Check back soon, because we got some stuff coming up. I know I always promise stuff. That's why I won't go on about it. But check back soon. All right? We got good stuff coming. Love you guys. Be safe out there. Take care of yourself. And in the meantime, uh, take care of yourself. That's it. All right, guys? All right, guys. Love you. Be safe. I will see you guys soon. Peace out. This is Thesis.